Hello, everybody, and good afternoon. My name's Don Arleth, and you're watching Midday Report here on TVP World, where we take stock of the day's most important developing stories. We start off in Finland, where today the first Eastern Flank Summit is taking place in Helsinki, with Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk in attendance. Our correspondent Kazimierz Wysiak is on the ground and has more.
Leaders of 8 countries bordering Russia and Belarus on NATO's eastern flank have gathered here in Helsinki for the first Eastern Flank Summit. The summit aiming to strengthen the defense of these countries and to coordinate on potential future additional EU funding. That's why this summit is not only attended by Prime Ministers of Poland, Latvia, Sweden and others, but also by the European Commissioner for Defense, Andrius Kubilius. Now, this summit also comes on the heels of the talks in Berlin concerning the peace in Ukraine, talks between Ukraine, the United States and other European countries. When I spoke with some of the leaders who came here before the summit, they told me that they are rather optimistic after the talks in Berlin. Especially we could see this optimism from Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk.
The most important thing today is this political positive phenomenon. I mean that we are on the one side, finally. I mean the Americans, the Ukrainians and the Europeans, that now it looks like we are really one team vis-à-vis Russia. And I hope it will continue.
However, while there is optimism, there is also some caution from these leaders, especially when it comes to the security guarantees for Ukraine. While the United States has announced that it will be ready to provide Ukraine with security guarantees similar to NATO Article 5, there is still little to no details about these security guarantees. We just don't know whether the United States would be willing to put troops on the ground in Ukraine. So that's why there is some reserved optimism from these leaders who arrived here for the summit. But when it comes to defense, there is also the case of what Russia will do. And the host of this summit, Finnish Prime Minister Orpo, has said that in the case of a deal struck between Ukraine and Russia, Moscow would move more troops towards NATO borders. So I asked him whether NATO should do the same.
It's obvious that if war will stop in Ukraine, they will move their forces more to the western border.
So should we move ours?
We need to strengthen our defense.
Among other topics here at this summit will be the use of Russian frozen assets, which will be one of the most important topics at the upcoming European Council summit on Thursday, where all EU leaders will gather and try to convince Belgium to allow the EU to give the Russian frozen assets to Ukraine. Now, the topic of frozen assets won't be the most important one. The most focus will be on defense of NATO's eastern flank, but the leaders gathered here are hoping that the EU can agree on the use of these frozen assets as well. From Helsinki, Kazimierz Wysiak, TVP World.
Speaking of which, Belgium still refuses to play ball when it comes to releasing frozen Russian assets for Ukraine. On Monday, the country pushed back against the European Commission's proposed concessions to unblock a 210 billion euro loan using frozen Russian assets to keep Ukraine funded for the next couple of years. Now let's go live to Brussels and our correspondent Alex Cadier for more details. Good afternoon, Alex. So due to this impasse, are hopes for a breakthrough on these frozen Russian assets all but lost at this stage? And will the War Claims Commission possibly help that effort?
Yeah, good afternoon, Don. With so much in Brussels, it's quite complicated, but very important. Let's break down those two separate stories that are linked. First, that Belgium opposition to the reparations loan. Belgium has been consistent in being opposed to the reparations loan because they worry, as the holder of the majority of those frozen assets right here at Euroclear in Brussels, they worry that any litigation, any liability would fall firmly on Belgium's shoulders, and the country does not want to be responsible for 90 billion euros worth of litigation should an international court in an unlikely scenario grant that case to Russia. That is part of the issue. The other part is about market confidence in Belgium and the perception from market forces that this is a confiscation and not a reparations loan. So let's break down what that means exactly. The European Union is proposing taking part of the frozen assets that are held here in Belgium and loaning them to Ukraine to help finance its civilian and military needs over the next couple of years. And Ukraine would be expected to repay that loan back into the frozen assets with reparations paid by Russia in any peace deal, Russia paying for the damage it caused in Ukraine. Belgium's opposition is this legal? They've had legal advice saying it is tenuous. The European Commission and other member states are more confident that they can do this. That is the crux of that debate. So that claims commission you mentioned is part of that legal framework, part of what it would look like. So the claims commission is the second of three parts when it comes to reparations for Ukraine. The first was a register of damages established in 2022. 60,000 individual cases have been registered of Russian war damage in Ukraine, dating all the way back to 2014. The Claims Commission that the EU leaders in The Hague today are installing will look at each and every one of those 60,000 claims and put a monetary value on it. How much does Russia owe for a destroyed hospital, for a destroyed rail line, for civilian deaths, for attacks on civilian infrastructure, as we've seen on the energy infrastructure? So it's a list of the damages, now a commission to decide how much Russia should pay, and then a fund to pay it. And a big part of that may be the Russian frozen assets, hence why the Belgians are a little bit reluctant. So, in short, to recap what is a complicated situation, the Belgians do not want to loan this money yet because they're worried about the legality, and also because it may be used to pay reparations to Ukraine after a peace deal. That all sounds very complicated, very elaborate. The other thing to say is the peace deal brokered by the United States could still throw all of this out of the window. So for now, the Europeans are hedging their bets, setting up these structures, but again, everything to play for in the next few weeks, Don.
All right, Alex Cardier, thank you for bringing a little bit of clarity to the complicated situation, reporting there from Brussels. Thank you. The European Parliament has approved safeguards to protect EU farmers from a surge of cheap South American imports once the Mercosur trade deal takes effect. Measures aimed at easing opposition from countries like France and Poland.
In France, the heat is on the streets, as the popular song from the 1980s went. The country's farmers on Tuesday protested yet again on the outskirts of Paris, prompting an emergency meeting of ministers. The reason? EU's newest trade deal with the South American Mercosur bloc, which, according to French farmers, will be the end of European agriculture. To address these concerns, the European Parliament passed a bill on Tuesday which asks the Commission to be very vigilant when it comes to the South American trade. In practice, the Commission will have to act when imports of some sensitive product, like beef or poultry, rises by more than 5%, and if those imports are at least 5% cheaper. It will be able even to temporarily suspend tariff-free quotas. The question is whether this is enough to placate countries like Poland and France who oppose the deal. Member States' representatives need to adopt the measures before Saturday, when the European Commission President will attend the deal's signing ceremony in Brazil.
Applause filled the European Parliament as Jana Poczobut accepted the 2025 Sakharov Prize on behalf of her father, jailed Belarusian and Polish journalist Andrzej Poczobut. This year's award was shared with Georgian journalist Mizia Amaglobeli, both winners unable to attend because they're still in prison for doing their job as journalists to bring truth to light and supporting democracy.
Thank you very much.
Applause for the daughter of Polish-Belarusian journalist and activist Andrzej Poczobut as she accepts the 2025 Sakharov Prize on his behalf. This year's honour was also shared by Georgian journalist Mizia Amaglobeli. Neither of the recipients were able to attend the ceremony at the European Parliament because they're both in prison.
Behind every name you read in reports, there is a home, a story, and people who wait. My father is not only a public figure. He is a husband, a son, a friend, and every day of these 5 years we have not known how he is, if he is safe. Yet every day we choose hope, because hope is the only thing that has not been taken from us.
Amaglobeli's friend and colleague Irma Dimitradze read an acceptance speech on her behalf.
Dear members of European Parliament, receiving the highest human rights award from you is a great honor and a great responsibility. And I accept it on behalf of my colleagues, the journalists who are now fighting in Georgia to save journalism as such. They work tirelessly to make sure that you hear the voice of resistance of Georgia's citizens, that the truth is not silenced.
European Parliament President Roberta Metsola said they were honoured for their work defending freedom.
Our European democracy is built on freedom of thought and expression. We know how much these values are worth, and we will never surrender them. Free and independent media are a key part of putting these values into practice. This is why it is so fitting that this year's prize goes to 2 journalists who are risking everything to expose threats to democracy in their 2 countries.
Poczobut was arrested in March 2021 and sentenced for what the Minsk regime called activities detrimental to the interests of the state after a widespread crackdown on opposition figures that followed the Belarusian 2020 presidential election. He is known for his outspoken criticism of Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko, and since his arrest has become a symbol of the fight for freedom and democracy in the country. Poczobut is currently being held in the Novoprototsk prison, one of the harshest penal facilities in Belarus. Amaglobeli, who founded 2 independent media outlets, was sentenced in August to 2 years of imprisonment for slapping a police chief at an anti-government protest in Georgia in January. In a video of the incident, the Georgian journalist is seen engaging in a fiery chat with the officer and then lightly slapping him across the face. Supporters demonstrated outside the courthouse against what they said was a politicised judiciary. The European Parliament's prize, named after the Soviet dissident Andrei Sakharov, has been awarded yearly since 1988 to human rights defenders. Past winners include South African President Nelson Mandela and Pakistani education activist Malala Yousafzai.
The time is now. Estonia will boost defense spending to over 5% of GDP in 2026 under a newly approved budget, a move the Prime Minister says is driven by the growing threat from Russia.
The Russian threat is not going away. It's quite clear because Estonia has made this budget just yesterday. Our president announced it. And our defense expenditure will be over 5% next year and years to come. And this is a very clear response. The same is probably all around the Baltics, Poland, and so on. So I would say that the best response to Russian threat is to be prepared, as Finns say, not to be afraid. That is a very important message.
Well, that's all the time we have here on Midday Report. Thank you for joining us. Have a great day and hope to see you next time. Goodbye.